and I'm coming to you from this scenic basement in Kentucky, and today we're going to be talking about the horn. So I'll walk you through what the horn is, some brief history, some conventions of writing for the horn in ensemble and solo settings, and then just answer some kind of general questions about the horn. So let's get started. The horn. What is it? The horn is a conical bore brass instrument. Conical bore means that it steadily increases in diameter. The other member of the brass family that does this is the tuba. This is in contrast to the other brass instruments, which are cylindrical bore, which means that the tube of which the instrument is constructed is a static diameter and then flares only at the very end. Like all brass instruments, the horn operates within the harmonic series using valves. When valves are depressed with the fingers of the left hand, it changes pitch, and the right hand actually rests inside the bell. It's used for sound quality, color, and shading of intonation. The horn is pitched in F, which we'll talk more about later, and functionally has a 4-octave range, making it one of the largest instrument ranges in the brass and wind family. So that's a little bit of background about what this instrument is. So let's talk about where it came from. So the journey from the very beginning to the modern horn spans literally thousands of years, but I'm going to condense it for you all today. The very origin is the ram's horn or the conch shell. These are naturally occurring, kind of vaguely conical bore-shaped things that people were blowing through for signaling. Over time, people began to work metals and they developed signal horns, which were used in military things. We know that they had horns of some kind. We're not super sure what they looked like or what they were used for specifically. But you see references to this in Roman texts, Greek texts, all kinds of historical texts. Now, we move on to hunting horns. The hunting horns were the first time that we can start looking at an instrument and saying, yes, that kind of resembles the modern horn. This is our very first identifiable ancestor. So, these hunting horns were pitched in a single key, and they were just an open circle of tubing. So you have only the notes of the harmonic series. They're typically being played while someone's actually riding a horse. The beauty of them is that they are loud, and they carry well in a forest. They are not musical instruments in the conventional sense. Nobody wants to sit and listen to concerts. From these hunting horns, we get the invention of the natural horn. And the natural horn differs from the hunting horn in that this is where it's first starting to be used as a musical instrument. It gets introduced into court orchestra. This is no longer just this loud thing that we use outside. So, the natural horns underwent a series of developments. Initially, they were all fixed pitch, meaning the bell, the interior tubing, and the mouthpiece are all one piece. If it's in D, it's in D. It plays only in one key. However, as these horns began to be integrated into the orchestra, very few orchestral pieces were just sitting in one key start to finish. So, composers wanted horns that could change pitch. Obviously, it's very inconvenient to play a little bit on one horn, put it down, pick up an entirely different instrument, play a little bit on that, put it down, pick up another one. You couldn't do that quickly, and you would need some kind of trolley to push all of these horns around. So they developed crooks. Crooks are lengths of lead pipe which are plugged into an existing horn. And then you have these lead pipes of variable length. These can be anywhere between 4 to 6 inches, which is tiny, and 18 feet, which is quite long. Because of this, the weight of the horn was different, the length of the horn was different, but it meant that when you were playing in an ensemble, you could just take the crook out, put a new crook in. So you had a lot less stuff to carry around and a lot more ability to change more quickly. Of these crooks, the most common were the E flat, E natural, and F. Those were kind of the solo keys that you would see etudes, concertos, double concertos, that kind of stuff written for, which is why, of course, now the modern horn, we picked one, it's the F crook, and that's why we're pitched in F. Now, with these crooks, we get access to different harmonic series. We have the E flat harmonic series, we have the E natural harmonic series, we have the D, B flat, we have all these different harmonic series, but we still have gaps in those harmonic series because we can only play the pitches of the harmonic series, and then maybe bend things around with your lips, but those notes are going to sound, quite honestly, bad. To fill this need, to make the horn more of a chromatic instrument, players gradually developed what's called hand technique. So the right hand was introduced to the bell, and through a system of fully closed, 3/4 closed, half closed, 1/4 closed, all the way out of the bell, through these gradations, players began to be able to change pitch with their hands, making the horn fully chromatic. Obviously, everybody's got a different size hand. There's no standard bell size at this time. Even now there isn't, but back then it was really anyone's game. So it was really difficult. Each player needed to spend a lot of time trying to discover exactly how to make each pitch. It presents difficulties for slurring, it presents difficulties for projection, and it makes it really hard to match the tone because some of the notes have a hand that's fully closed and some of them have a hand that's fully out of the bell. How do you make those two sound the same? In the hands of virtuoso players, we have documentation that they were able to do this, but it was definitely a challenge and it required a lot of practice. Players were looking for ways to continue to improve their instrument and to continue to rise to the demands of the orchestral music which was being written. So, in the early 1800s, we have the invention of the valve. Initially, these valves were really unreliable and they were mistrusted by players, teachers, and composers. So natural horn actually existed with valve horns for about 100 years before the natural horn finally faded into obscurity and the valve horn became the primary instrument. So what do the valves do? The valves are essentially a way to change keys on the horn. This is not the way we think about it in terms of fingering, but this is technically, acoustically what's going on. Each valve combination gives you access to a new set of harmonic series, and between all of these different harmonic series, you have options for how to finger every note of the range. So the horn's fully chromatic. That's how the valves work. Most orchestral players today play what's called a double or triple horn. Let's talk a little bit about the different uses of the horn. We're all used to seeing horns in orchestras. Sections are typically 2 or 4 horns. Some pieces call for 3, but this is actually far less common. Conventionally, horn parts are divided high and low, but the modern player is expected to be able to play the full range competently. So don't feel like if you're writing a low horn part, you can't write above a certain pitch. That's not true. These are just kind of guidelines for where most of the notes are going to sit. So a low horn part may include a few high notes, but is probably going to sit more in the mid to low register. And the high part is probably going to include a few low notes, but is mostly going to sit in the higher part of the range. Let's talk through each role in a section. Horn 1 is the highest horn part. It is the most prominent. It is the most soloistic role. Horn 2 is generally considered a low part. It serves as a duet partner for Horn 1, but may occasionally have solo moments. Horn 3 is a high horn part. Horn 3 does sometimes get solos. You'll see this especially in the works of Brahms. Horn 3 also sometimes gets solo moments with Horn 4, where they're playing duets together like Horn 1 and 2 do. Horn 3 can also play duets with Horn 1, so there's a lot of flexibility for how to use Horn 3. Horn 4 is a low horn part. Horn 4 may play duets with Horn 2 or with Horn 3, and it typically serves as a harmonic foundation for the section. It can also be a fairly independent part. Orchestral uses of the horn typically fall into a few categories. We have true solo, as in maybe there's some accompaniment going on, but it's a big ol' horn solo. We have exposed solely playing with members of the horn section or select members of the brass, woodwinds, or strings, especially cellos, but maybe other strings. We also have moments where the horn is playing a kind of supportive, prominent counter melody underneath something else that's a solo line. And then we also have horns functioning in chordal or non-soloistic content with 2D forces. Horns feature very prominently in bands as well because they're a rich, full, mid-range voice. In bands, typically you do have a 4-part section as described in the orchestra. In bands, much more so than orchestras, the parts may be doubled. Sometimes horn 1 and 2 are high, and sometimes horn 3 and 4 are low, and sometimes it's the way it is in orchestra. Horns 1 and 3 are high, Horns 2 and 4 are low. That's more a convention of band music than orchestra, but that's something to be aware of. In terms of the roles that they fill in band, it is generally the same as the orchestral roles. So we're going to talk a little bit about chamber and solo uses. Horn appears in a wide variety of chamber groups. We appear in brass quintet. They typically function as the mellow middle voice. You need to be really smart about how you voice horns in brass quintet. Trumpet and trombone are what we call directional instruments, as in the sound comes directly out of the bell at you. Horns, of course, the bell points backwards, so it bounces off a wall or a sound shield and then goes out, which means that the projecting power is not necessarily the same. That's something to be aware of when you're writing for horns in a brass ensemble. Okay, we also have wind quintet. Horns actually have the reverse problem in the wind quintet. A horn can easily overpower the other forces in the wind quintet, so it's important to just be sensitive to that. Horns also appear in ensembles with one another. Horn duet, horn trio, horn quartet, horn sextet, and horn octet are probably the most common, as well as full horn choir, which is 10 plus horn parts. Duets and quartets tend to follow orchestral conventions in terms of range and prominence of the different parts, so that could be an interesting way to really focus on those section playing. So other things you might see for horn: concertos. The horn has a really rich 4-octave range and can play a wide variety of characters, so horn concertos have great possibility and potential for musicality. Horn and piano, or sometimes harp. These include sonatas as well as standalone pieces or character works. And then there's horn alone, the unaccompanied horn. This is a genre which has really been growing since about the 1940s. It is a really interesting way to explore technique. So let's talk about some conventions for writing for the horn. The first one I want to address is key signatures. Going way back in time, in the 1700s, we're playing natural horns. We have crooks, but we don't have valves. Horns did not normally play in key signatures because whatever crook they were in was the key of the piece, so they did not need a key signature. However, modern horns are pitched in F, and they do use key signatures. Another consideration is that horns, like other brass instruments, rely primarily upon the lips to produce accurate pitches. As such, composers can write more idiomatically for horn if they prepare extremely high or low notes by leading to them melodically, by step, or by reasonable interval, as well as to give the hornists a few warm-up notes before big solos, and avoiding extreme leaps as a matter of consistency. An occasional extreme leap can be really expressive, but a ton of them is going to be really difficult to execute. When I do communicate these idiomatic conventions, it's not to say that you should never write any of the things that I've mentioned. It's just a warning that if your piece includes a large number of these kinds of things, the odds are that there are going to be more chips. Be cognizant of that challenge, and if you want to write something like that, understand that that's going to be a really special moment, rather than just a standard way that you're going to write for the horn throughout every single thing you ever write. Other thing I want to address is bass clef. This is one of the most confusing things to explain to people who don't play the horn, so I'll do my best here. Horn players have two styles. We have old notation and new notation. When you write old notation in F for the horn, the pitch will sound a fourth higher. When you write new notation for the horn in F, the pitch will sound a fifth lower. You're doing score study and you're looking, and the horn part just seems crazy, crazy low. Probably it's in old notation. This is particularly if you're looking at an early romantic or classical era piece. It's probably in old notation. Anything in the 20th century and beyond is probably new notation. Probably they're not going to transpose up the octave, therefore it's going to be a fifth lower than notated. But this is something whenever we see bass clef in a piece, we always check a recording. We look at the fourth horn part, which is usually lowest, and see where are their pitches sitting, and then kind of go from there to figure out if we're in old or new notation. Let's talk a little bit about the extended techniques. Stopped horn. Stopped horn is a buzzy, brassy effect created by closing the hand and the bell. It can be very effective at moments, but it is also a technique that does become rather fatiguing if it's sustained for a long period of time. We have a straight mute. This is the only kind of standard orchestral mute that we use. The straight mute changes the color of the instrument, and it also serves as a way to make the horn softer. If you really want it to fade out, it will kill some of the resonance. Echo horn is used less commonly in compositions that aren't from 20th century France. Echo horn is just another color. It's also created by almost closing the hand in the bell, but not quite. So rather than getting the brassiness of stopped horn, you get this kind of ethereal, otherworldly kind of muted effect. Other things which are more standard to other instruments: flutter tonguing, multiple tonguing, double and triple tonguing, and then glissandi. On the horn you have two options. You can do valved glissandi or harmonic series glissandi. If you're writing a harmonic series glissando, please make sure that it is a harmonic series glissando. Don't write a harmonic series glissando that can't be done on any harmonic series. Multiphonics. Multiphonics are where a player hums or sings one pitch while producing another pitch by playing it on the horn. This one is quite tricky to do. I have had a few experiences where I've gotten a piece that includes multiphonics and I can't sing the note that I'm supposed to be singing. Be careful that you're not assuming that your brass players will be male. If you want more information about extended technique, I would highly recommend a book by Douglas Hill called Extended Techniques for the Horn. Definitely check that out. I'm now just going to talk briefly about some kind of common questions that seem to come up. What is this instrument actually called? French horn? Just horn? Horn in F? The clearest way to refer to it, horn in F. And while we're on the topic of horn in F, in general, yes, your part should be in F. Unless there's a specific musical reason to write in another key, it should be in F. Maybe you've been studying the classical era and you're really inspired by this horn solo piece written in E flat, and you want to create a neoclassical response to it, and you want to put it in E flat for that specific artistic reason. That makes sense, and that's something that will inform performance. Another thing about sections is that, yes, sometimes the section gets extended. Most commonly, they get extended adding pairs of horns. So the standard is 4, sometimes you see 6, sometimes you see 8, and then occasionally you get even more than that. The convention is to keep adding them in the same pattern. So odd numbers are high, even numbers are low. For a horn in F, the pitch that I play will sound a fifth lower. And, special bonus, Wagner tuba. What is it? Wagner tuba is a brass instrument invented by Wagner, as the name would suggest. This eponymous instrument is something that he developed for use in his operas. It's a raucous, raw, rough sound. It exists somewhere between trombone and horn. It's designed to be this kind of special sound coming out of the orchestra where the audience says, "What is that?" You see it in works of Wagner, you see it in works of Strauss. It comes up from time to time. Check out some stuff by John Erickson. He's written a couple books about it. That would be my recommendation there if you're interested in Wagner tuba as well.